we will be having a roving conversation focusing in on how to measure and communicate about sustainability. I'm Lucy Shea, I'm the Group CEO of Futerra. I'll tell you a little bit about us in a moment. But first of all, can we please welcome our fantastic set of speakers, our panelists. So we have Andreas Christen, who's the COO of Lantal Textiles. We have Shahriare Mahmood, who's the CSO of Spinnova. We have Isabel Furtado, who's the CEO of TMG Automotive. There's a tour with TMG tomorrow if you want to sign up for that. And we have Robert, I didn't check how to pronounce your surname, Šimek?
Yeah, okay.
Šimek, who's the president of RETEX. So, did I pronounce that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Welcome to our panelists. Round of applause, please. So the purpose of this panel is to provide a discussion amongst industry entrepreneurs about the topic of sustainability, how to communicate, how to measure it. And I think we can see it as a deep dive into some of the context setting that we heard from the fantastic speakers earlier. So I'm really excited to hear about the entrepreneurial opportunity of sustainability and also some of its challenges. And we will, of course, cover what we can see as a future for the industry as well, a future for the textile sector. So I'm Lucy Shea, I'm the Group CEO of Futerra, and what Futerra does is we do the structure and story of change for our partners and clients. We are a B corporation, and also we are mission first and mission led. Our mission is to make the Anthropocene awesome. So Anthropocene, meaning the recent age of humans, the geological era we are now living in, and awesome meaning not incrementally better or less bad, but really going for, well, I heard it's cute when English people swear, going for fucking awesome. So when I say structure and story, I mean that, for example, we worked with F1 back in 2019 to take them net zero by 2030, so the structure and deep sustainability strategy for that. But we also work with Econil on their story of change and rebranding Econil to its story of endless possibilities. We work with Google on their circular strategy, mapping their entire value chain, but also on the Fridays for Future school strikes, helping to tell that story of change. So we'll be diving deep into both the structure and story of sustainability. All right, so let's go to our panelists. Andreas, can you start us off? And so we've got a lot of questions we could dive into. We've also would love to hear questions from you. There's on the Hoover app, there is a set of questions you can add to. In fact, there's a set of questions you can start, and there's also some polls you can answer. And I'll keep an eye on my phone and see any answers to polls we get in and any questions we get in. And we'll also pass the mic round towards the end of the session. But Andreas, back to you. So tell us a little bit about this entrepreneurial opportunity. Now, we've got a set of B2B companies here, entrepreneurs, some kind of born good sustainability, some born again towards sustainability. You deliver into transportation, mainly aviation, trains and buses. So tell us, is sustainability important in these markets? Is it a source of competitive edge? Is it an entrepreneurial space, in your opinion?
Yeah, so maybe I can tell a story of a failure in this field.
Yeah, that's good.
20 years ago, we started with a very sustainable product. We developed a cradle-to-cradle product. It was, or still is, a seat upholstery. As you sit on it, more or less, but it was completely cradle-to-cradle. So you can take it, put it to soil, and it will disappear without any harm for environment. Because we are a very vertical integrated company producing in Europe, so we never left.
No.
the production place Europe. We were in a good base to do that, so we had to invent the right chemistry, the right materialization, of course. And we had the product, and it was also fulfilling all requirements of the aviation industry, which is quite a bunch of requirements. And it also looked good.
Right.
But yeah, so far so good. And now the problem comes, the other side of the medal is it costs a bit more. We are not talking about 30% more or 20% more. We are more talking about like 10% more. And the product didn't find the way to the market in a big scale. So that's what happened 20 years ago in our industry, aviation industry. A big polluter, focus industry when it comes to environment change, climate change. But what we feel now, we had now the first conventions after the pandemic, is that it's getting more and more real serious, that it's not just about greenwashing and nice stories, but that they want to really see figures, and that's really getting more and more important in tenders.
Yeah. And you might be pleased to see that in terms of the poll, there is absolute agreement that getting too enthusiastic. All right, thank you. So is an entrepreneurial opportunity. So thanks for participating in that. And now, set the stage. We know what it is, but how do we go about activating this? And as we always say in communications, content is king. So, Shahriare, can you tell us a little bit about how content of innovation can help to promote sustainability, drive sustainability within the business? Tell us your innovation story.
Absolutely. I think Spinnova is all about innovation. And in fact, Spinnova is providing the opportunity to show the industry how an innovation can lead. Maybe briefly a bit about Spinnova. Many of you perhaps don't know, we are a fiber innovation company. We produce fiber. We is yet not producing commercially, but we have a great innovation that can produce the fiber from wood pulp, wood-based raw material, or anything that is containing cellulose, even non-cellulosic product. But very important point is that it is a technology, it is an innovation that produces fiber without using any chemical process. So I think even before I will talk about the sustainability aspects of Spinnova, sustainability aspects of our product, but even before I joined to the company, I couldn't believe that really so many sustainability aspects are from one product. But what we have seen that when we have got this innovation, we have had the possibility to drive even further. We've been using the raw materials that traditionally been used for decades in the industry, the wood pulp, we know the viscose, lyocell, many good fibers are there in the market. But we take the same raw material but produce a product absolutely without any environmental burden. Well, without means almost any burden. And very interestingly, it is not having a kind of chemical processing, it is basically keeping intact the original form of the cellulose, which means that in a natural fiber that we get. The industry is looking for such kind of solution. We know the environmental burden we are producing with the natural fibers like cotton. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that industry is looking for such kind of opportunities or the alternatives. And we have seen a lot of interest from the brands, retailers. When we have been applying the product in different kind of applications, textile application, we have found that it has really, it has shown that there is a true potential to be replaced for cotton. And all these we basically produce without using any chemical, without using any water. It's basically mimicking how a spider is producing the web, or a fiber first, of course. And we just use that way to produce a fiber. And as we don't use any chemical or water, we have actually a production unit to be inaugurated soon that we do not need even an environmental permit, because we don't produce any wastewater, we don't produce any solid waste, we don't produce any air emission. So we have applied for it, and they said, no, you don't need it.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Shahriare, can I ask you to extend a little bit, and then, Robert, I'll go to you. So what have you found that's worked with your brand partnerships? Obviously, you work with Adidas and Marimekko. So in terms of communicating these sustainability efforts, whether it's from you to the brands, B2B, or whether it's from the brands onwards to the consumers, what have you found that's worked well?
It's extremely important that the message is reaching up to the consumer, the final user. As a sustainability professional, I strongly believe that even from a normal consumer perspective, if a product is more valuable, we try to keep it or try to use it longer. Right. So it has definitely more value if you really know the value. So we want that the sustainability advantage that we have in our process, in our product, that is reaching up to the consumer. As you rightly said, we are here B2B company, so we really need to reach it first to our customers, so to a retailer, to a brand. And it is very important that it is visible. It is not lost in the care label, that there somewhere is mentioned Spinnova, that's it. But I think the story, all this talk should be reaching up to the consumer. So we are building our brand also quite strongly. I think we have seen already in the market. And the partners, brand partners, retailers are valuing it highly, so that we have done a lot of co-branding also. Yeah. I think that will reach to consumer much better.
We'll return to that if we get a moment on brand building and co-branding, but that's a great tip, I think, to go into partnership with the brands or the OEMs. In terms of polls, we asked you all, is it the end consumer driving interest in sustainability for brands and the OEMs? We didn't give you any multiple choice, just a simple yes, no. And this time we've got 18 out of 22 saying yes, but an interesting 4 out of 22 saying no. So when it comes to questions, please feel free to dig into that. We've got a little bit of disagreement there, so let's feel free to dig into that as we go on. All right, Robert, let me go to you, and then I'll return to Isabel. Because, Isabel, you're going to tell us about the future of the industry. But before we go there, Robert, I would love if you could dive into the story of sustainability for your business and the importance in the recycling message in promoting and measuring sustainability.
Yeah. Okay, when I will discuss about the sustainability, for me it's a different story than maybe for the Ari, because we are on opposite side. It means that there is not pushing from the textile industry, but to recycling textile material, push different industries and textile. It's not good. It's not good. But it's true. And it means that we have now a very good business with producers of trains and buses, because they try to replace mineral material for the insulation by recycled material. And our parameters, it's very good. Price, it's competitive. Yeah. And it's very good for us. Second industry, what it's push to the sustainability, maybe more. It's automotive. Maybe Isabel will speak about this, but okay, it's your job. Third one, it's household appliances. The biggest European producer push
Yeah.
more to the sustainability, and they would like to present that they are producer with recycling material. They don't use this for the isolation formaldehydes and biphenyls and other very good substances for the life. It means that this is the other application, and what is very nice now, that through the recycled textile material, we are produce green roofs and retention boards, and it's help to save some consumption of water, and we try to save water in a nature, and we have some very nice project, especially in Israel, in Romania, in Egypt, and it's very nice. And through the sand ground during the maybe 2 months, you will see first green grass and some small trees. It's very nice too. Okay. Okay.
Let me just extend for a moment, because I think what was very wonderful that you brought up there is that often solving for sustainability can be a multi-solve. You know, you might be solving for climate mitigation here, but you're going to actually end up being able to solve for biodiversity and water, etc. And I know I know that for your company, the focus on the social is very important, as well as the environmental. And sometimes we can end up just talking about environmental sustainability. So could you bring in a little bit of the kind of the social community side and the importance in integrating social and environment when promoting sustainability, or integrating it into your business?
Social. Maybe when it's correct to speak about the social, maybe another using of recycled material, what we have now, it's in process. It's you know, social hoses. It means complete hoses prepared from the recycled material, not only textile, but we use textile like the imitation of the bricks, and we try to cooperate. We have cooperated with producer of Tetra Pak boards. It's possible to use too. It means that it's waste too. It's recycled material too, and with green roofs. Yeah, it means that we have special project, and I hope that we will finish this project, and we will apply especially, but maybe not in Europe. we apply in different countries. But it's a very nice project, and it's help to normal people.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And as well, if we want to pick up on as we go, we've highlighted the issue of the energy crunch in Europe and around the world, and thinking about living standards for our teams and our employees as well, I feel is going to become more and more present for business leaders. But Isabel, let me go to you. I thought what was fantastic about this morning's presentations is a wonderful blend of reality and pragmatism, but also hope and optimism for the future. So Isabel, what's your hope in terms of, again, measuring and communicating about sustainability? Where do you think the vision, where do you think the industry is going to go?
Good morning, everybody. The industry has one way to go. It has to become more efficient, more intelligent, and cleaner. And we heard Pedro Xavier explain that very well. Why more efficient? Because we need to take better care of our resources. Resources are scarce. Even in Portugal, nowadays we don't have water. I mean, that was something we never worried much in the past. We have to efficiently use our resources and then optimize them inside our companies. And digitalization is a very good path to do it, because using data, and we're in the era of knowledge. We are in the era of big data and knowledge, and no use having big data if you cannot make it usable and take profit out of it.
Right.
So all these together with automation, and then you also have to be cleaner. And when we talk about sustainability, it's no longer a choice. So you have to produce cleaner, you have to produce in a cleaner way. And that, of course, in the industry, and we are responsible for a lot of emissions, energy is a big issue. But for my type of industry, not just energy, we have to be able to dissociate economic growth, because economic growth is very important and prosperity is very important. We don't want to go back to the Flintstones cars, that's for sure. But we have to dissociate this from the fossil-based energy and materials, because I'm in the type of industry where a lot of materials are still fossil-based. So we have to go on to biopolymers and agro-based. Again, that's a challenge, because we cannot take land to make biopolymers and take food away from people.
Totally.
So it's a very tight, close balance we have to make. So when we talk about circularity, that's the best thing we can have, really, because we're going to reuse, in the end, our materials. To do this, we have to think in different terms. And now, okay, I work in the car industry, and probably the car industry is a little bit ahead of the traditional textiles, because there's a lot of pressure on the car makers to go greener, to go more recyclable, to go more circular. So, of course, it is like a push and pull, and my clients, especially, that's okay, the Northern European countries are more strict on environmental needs, and the people buy cars as well because of their sustainability content.
Yeah,
which
totally.
is very interesting.
There's a piece of research we use all the time at Futerra around, it's called Values Modes. It's by Pat Dade and Chris Rose. Cultural Dynamics is their firm. And it looks at the values that people hold around sustainability. And it shows that across all markets, people fall broadly into three buckets. There's the two lots who are outer-directed, two lots who are inner-directed. So your settlers, or your brickwedge, as we call them, they like, you know, local and community, small world thinkers. So things like littering and green spaces around are very important. You've got your pioneers, or your greens, who like big world, climate change, solving issues, concerned about floods in Pakistan, but not necessarily know if the little old lady living next door is okay or not. And then the middle and biggest wedge in any market are the golds, the prospectors. And they're the ones that get their sense of self in how others see them. So status, fashion, success, all very important. Status signifiers. And interestingly, it looks like in the Nordic countries, you think, oh, well, in the Nordics, you've got more greens than golds. But the golds look like greens in the Nordic countries, because that is high status there. So they're thinking about our end consumer and how we can help give products that drive status signals, I think is always a great thing for entrepreneurial. But Isabel, hold the mic, if you like, for a moment, because we were talking yesterday about measurement. Now, again, this morning, we've heard a really fantastic deep dive into the context, the regulatory framework at the EU level. And there are other and complementary frameworks developing as well, with the Science-Based Targets Initiative. And I'm sure many of the businesses that you're selling into are, well, I also sit on the steering committee for the UN Fashion Charter, and that requires the fashion brands to sign up to halve climate emissions by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. So I wondered, Isabel, we'll start with you and we'll go around. Even if you are not directly affected yourselves by, you know, the PEF, for example, where is the pressure coming from your OEMs and brands? Because obviously we are, the textile industry is the scope 3 for the brands, basically. Where is the pressure coming from, and how are you measuring? Practically, how are you measuring in order to help fulfill scope 3 or the other pushes to reduce energy and climate change emissions?
That's a very good question. Well, first of all, you can only measure what you know.
Right.
So I'll start with the very first challenge, is to establish a starting point and a baseline. Okay, I'm not into eco-labeling because the car industry doesn't use it, but we use something very complex called life cycle assessment, LCA. And the most important thing is that the car industry requires this. So since 2017, we made a path towards sustainability, because you just don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be sustainable tomorrow. It's a big effort. It's a strategic decision. You have to have very high top management commitment, otherwise it's impossible to do. So the first thing we did was to look at our peers in the industry and benchmark our business against them. And we're talking about companies that are 5, 6 times bigger than I. So we had to see where to go. Then we defined our own metrics. And okay, we decided LCA was a good metric. Nowadays, we have done LCA to more than 100 products, so we know where we stand. But, as you said, and I think Mario George also talked about reciprocity, but we have something here that we need urgently. And that's what we call a European taxonomy, which means common rules with equal criteria. And Pedro Cisa Vieira talked about nuclear. Okay, if I make an LCA, and I'm going to say OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, car makers. If I do an LCA for Volvo, nuclear is not accepted. If I do an LCA for Daimler, BMW, nuclear is accepted. So where do I stand? And how do I communicate that? Is it better? Is it worse? If I buy a Volvo, am I better for the environment? And this is very important, because a lot of greenwashing with a lot of rules is also possible. And we have to set very, I wouldn't say strict, but very clear and transparent and equal rules.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to have, again, we're going to compete on different grounds. But going back to the LCA, it's very important to measure your emissions. And okay, you said scope 3, but we manage very well scope 1, scope 2, and 15 categories in scope 3. I'm on the far end of Europe. I have to send the material to the Czech Republic. BMW has a big factory there, so my ecological footprint is going to be very much affected by that. But yet, I cannot allow China to put the material here and not be accountable for the emissions they're doing while transporting the material to Europe.
Right.
So globalization with local rules is like shooting in our own feet. And Europe should not allow that at all costs. So we have, I think, 3 main issues here. We have to have equal rules, equal criteria for the rules, and it has to be global, because let's be quite honest, if I make emissions here or I make them in China, it all goes up to the same place. So no use saying that we polluted the world in the 60s. Well, a lot of our parents smoked, and we were in the car smoking with them. It's unthinkable to get a kid in your car smoking today. We didn't know better, but today everybody knows better. So it's compulsory, it's mandate that we all follow the same.
Yeah. Which does lead into an interesting questions around loss and damage and reparations as well. But let's not go there for the moment. Shahriare, I saw you nodding there. Do you want to pick up on this measurement and KPIs issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I am very much aligned what Isabel said. So I think it's a consensus also needed. LCA is an extremely good tool. We need it this to reach the consensus. And at the same time, we also need to reach to a level that what we are accepting in comparison. In case of Spinnova, when we say that we are saving 99.5% water compared to a conventional cotton, well, now with what you are comparing? So for some of our partners, you should compare with this standard. For some of our partners, you should compare with that standard. Like Isabel mentioned, nuclear power is acceptable for someone, or for someone is not. So I think a global, if not global, even in the EU level, through the regulation, some sort of consensus need to be reached. Otherwise, it's very confusing also for the end consumers. And if there are too many eco levels, even a textile industry person, I'm sometimes even confused what it really tells to me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yes, and we were hoping there was going to be some convergence around HIG, but that's not working at the moment. So it seems that everyone here is kind of somewhat in agreement with you all, because in terms of how to measure your sustainability efforts, the majority of you say, we know how to measure some of them. So that does seem in a light. Now, Andreas, I know I could ask you a measurement question, but I actually would like to move to a communications and greenwashing question, and then we'll start looking at opening to the floor. Also in here, we've got a poll around being worried about greenwashing in sustainability communications, and the overwhelming majority of you are worried about greenwashing. So, Andreas, I know that you've got a very good story around your most sustainable product. Please do tell us that. But can you also extend that by talking about what you found in your business as a good way of avoiding greenwashing or overstating green claims as a definition of greenwashing?
So what we don't have is we don't have labels in our business. So that problem we don't have. I have it as a customer. I have it as we are more in the same boat there. But our OEMs, Airbus, Boeing, Embraer, and so on, they are going to figures. I personally believe that we have not just to look how to produce a product, but the whole life cycle.
Right.
In our case, for example, every square meter carpet in an airplane needs, if it's 100 grams or 200 grams heavier, needs more kerosene over the lifespan. So, and how do you recycle it, and how long can you use it? I mean, in the fashion industry, that's a very important topic. Is it something you can wear for 20 years because it's a Levi's 501 jeans and it works, or is it very fashionable and it's outdated next year?
Have you seen that a pair of Levi's from the 1800s has just been sold for $76,000?
I have read it. I'm not sure if it's true, but that's also a fashion.
They were found in a mine, but they do look in very good nick. I agree.
So, but here are many fashion people, so I shouldn't talk against fashion. So our most sustainable product is more a bit. It's not a product which is in very high volumes, but we wanted just to go to the extreme. And what we did is we are producing a product with a complete supply chain which is lower than 200 kilometers. So I'm quite sure we are the only one in the whole room from the raw material. What we do is we collect wool in the Swiss Alps under the Matterhorn. It's a quite famous mountain. You eat it in form of chocolate when you eat Toblerone. And there are living the most beautiful sheep. Schwarznasenschafe, it's a German word, so we talked about German, it's a difficult language. And we collect them from the farmers directly. We wash it in our own spinning mill in the Emmental, that's where cheese is from, with the holes. And then we spin it, we ply it, and then we weave carpets out of it and we finish it. And also, if people want it in a color, we dye it in our own fiber dyeing plant. But mainly we want to do it in natural colors. And there we have a carpet which is using about 20% of the water normally you use. If we don't dye it, we are using almost zero transportation costs and emissions, because it's really just about 200 kilometers. Of course, a bit up and down because there are mountains in Switzerland. And that's a product where we see that would never be a business-to-business product, but it's a business-to-customer product, because people understand that they can buy a product where from the raw material till the finished product, it's never leaving the Swiss border. And Switzerland is really a tiny country, really, really tiny. And that's a story people understand and people are willing to pay, but only rich people. Only rich people. And I think one problem when we talk about sustainability and entrepreneurs talk about it and C-level people, these are all people who can afford. But the critical mass should be able to afford sustainable products. That's far more important because there you have the volume where you can change. Yeah.
I would love to pick up on that a little to say that, you know, I asked a question earlier about behavior change and consumer lifestyles because it's clear that that's coming down the line from IPCC and from other areas. And it also can help because the number one thing we always say to our partners is, if you want to avoid greenwash, stop telling everyone about what you've done. You know, it's fantastic that you've done this work, but no one really cares. Everyone wants to know how you can help them. So this focus there about how you can help with a product which aids in the efficiency of the carrying of the airline, for example, is really key for me. And if you look around at the explosion of consumer interest that was touched on earlier, at the start of the pandemic, our client Google found that there was a 4,550% rise in people searching for how to live a sustainable lifestyle. So when thinking about your communications, to almost go 180, these are all the things that you've done, which are brilliant, but look at what your customer or your consumer needs help with to be more sustainable, efficient, green, etc., and focus your communications around that. Now, can we go rapidly around this greenwash question and then open to the floor? Shahriare, best tip for avoiding greenwash?
I think measurement, of course, is one of the key things, and we have been discussing on it. To avoid greenwashing, I think, to me, most important, well, I'm from the so-called apparel fashion industry, so I think that it's very important, easy communication to the consumer, very bold communication. Even in my previous roles, I have been very much saying it internally that not too many things. There could be a lot of sustainability aspects. Very boldly, couple of or maximum 3, you can communicate that consumers really understand. Yeah, this means you have saved 99% water. Now, if Spinnova fiber goes to, let's say, to a consumer product, we have saved in a fiber level 99.5%, not the whole product. So I think consumer will not go the fiber level, yarn level, fabric level, etc., etc. Very bold communication to the final product, what it is.
Fantastic, good. Isabel, best tip to avoid greenwash?
I would think the best way to avoid greenwash is to make transparent, clear reports on it. I find that if you use science-based targets, if you follow the United Nations Global Compact SDGs, and you make an annual sustainability reports with medium and long-term goals, and you measure those, and you measure, again, using LCAs or whatever, you always have a common grounds. So you're comparing not just your evolution, but your evolution against your peers. And that information is good for the outside, it's good for your customers, it's good for your clients, because I don't have consumers, I have clients, but also inside your company. Because then that information, to the outside, you make a report, the report is public, the banks want that report. That report can be very helpful when you want a loan, but also inside. Inside, a bit more complex, you need to cascade this information. Because everybody in the company has to know exactly what's their importance towards a common goal. If you do like KPIs at different levels, you cascade the information and you deliver it all the way, I wouldn't say down to the shop floor, but all the way up to the shop floor.
Right.
And communication has to be assertive, has to be objective, but it has to be emotional because you're
Yeah.
talking about changing in attitude.
Yeah.
So I would focus on these two things. Make it reliable, transparent, with rules. It has to be ruled. And then make it emotional so you pass the message.
I'm so pleased you raised the issue of internal communications. It's the piece that sometimes gets forgotten in this conversation, and it's so critical in this journey. And after all, we are, you know, we are the storytelling ape. So, you know, we need the facts, but we need the heart as well. We need the stories. Robert, what would be your guidance or recommendation in order to avoid greenwash?
I try to thinking about the situation, and I have to say why we not solve this problem when we discuss about the automotive. Why we not solve this problem with sustainability for the rail industry. For me, reason is that they have very good setup processes, they have very good setup parameters, and I think that this is our main problem. Yeah, we have some systems, ESG, we have maybe possibilities to set up EPR, we have LCA analysis, but it's a functionality of the LCA analysis in automotive, it's very good. They know exactly, okay, discussion about the nuclear power station, but it's very good. And for the customers, when they know that the producer of the cars have EITF 16949, it's some parameter. It means that this producer is sustainable, or maybe he push to sustainability. But in a system, when we have more than 200 different eco-labels, excuse me, it's not good. It's not good. It's necessary to cut this situation and maybe set up one eco-label, maybe one, I don't know, ISO system, textile ISO system. And when producer have this ISO system in a company, it means that he is sustainable and he produces sustainable material and products.
Yeah.
This is very important.
The burden can be quite high, can't it? Because it's not just from EU, there's developments in the US as well with the Fabric Act and the Workers' Rights one in the California Act as well. So, okay, I would love to thank you so much for answering that last question. And you really touched on many of the 10 signs of greenwash. So 14 years ago at Futerra, we wrote the Greenwash Guide. It is due an update for digital and Web3, but some of the pieces you highlighted there, so kind of, you know, things to watch out for, like gobbledygook, you know, a range of messages rather than the clear, credible one, or, you know, sustainable product but dirty company are some other ones to look out for. So that's on our website if you want to have a look at the Greenwash Guide and the 10 signs of greenwash. Okay, now, any questions from the floor? Yep, okay, we've got a couple of hands up here and here. We'll take 2 questions in a row and then we'll answer them.
Good morning.
Hello, we can't hear you. Is it on? Oh yeah, it's good.
Good morning. Now it's better?
That's great.
Delighted to see such good and intelligent colleagues on this conference. My name is Jose. I'm the CEO of Riopel in the north of Porto, in Famalicão. And I would just like to pass you a challenge that is also a personal one on my daily job. We speak about a lot of the players on the industry, whether it's textile or another. I'm coming from the automotive industry before this challenge. And we speak about consumers. And I think we tend to forget or to put on a third account the fact that we are the consumers.
Yes.
Okay, so we could ask the questions ourselves. So do we believe that the person that is sitting next to us is using sustainable clothes? Are we sure we are using a sustainable? So it's easier to send the responsibility to a third party. We can say it's the consumers, and then when we finally understand that we are the consumers, we pass it to the Z generation. No, it's not the Z generation, it's all of us. Yep,
Could
absolutely.
you
It's better.
guide to a question? Thank
Okay,
you.
so
By the
finally,
way, I
just,
agree.
just,
I agree 100%.
Just the final question, sorry for the time.
That's okay.
It would be to, what are we really doing so that consumers change the way they are buying, and not what government is doing about it?
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. We had a second question. The gentleman here. Thank you.
Good morning, Otakar Petráček. I'm the president of the Czech Textile Association, and I'm colleague of Robert. I just want to point out one eye-opening which he caused to me. Before we started our talks, say 2-3 years back, about textile waste, and this is something what we will talk about during today quite intensively. I believe that we have the textile waste as an industry for ourselves. So our main challenge is, how do we cope with the textile recycling? To make new yarns, to make new non-wovens, and that our goal is to use it. And then I find out that companies like RETEX can very easily steal, they say steal, the textile waste from the textile industry and make very good products for other industries like construction, transport. So we have to be very clever to use it for ourselves as well. Otherwise, it disappears into other industries.
It's a fantastic point. And is it a question, how to use it?
The question to Robert is just to tell us how many tons of the textile waste you can utilize or recycle per day. Thank you.
That's a great, if you're happy to answer that, Robert, that is a great question. And thank you so much for raising some entrepreneurial competitive spirit there. Thank you. Robert, question to you. If I might just kind of take it back one step and say, was there a moment when you realized that the waste stream represented a business opportunity for your business? And then if you're happy to answer it, yes, how many tons are you getting through a day? How much is left for everyone else?
I think that this is not about the tons. Maybe it's thanks. But I have to say that mainly we have a bigger problem, bigger issue, and this is that in Europe we recycle it 1 to maximum 3% of textile material.
Right.
And this is the big problem for us. When we discuss about the technology, it's I don't want to say that it's easy, but okay, it's not so complicated. But it's very important for us to not put the waste textile to municipal wastes and to ground. It's better to recycle it and maybe use for the. It's not good for the textile, but for the different industry. Yeah, when we discuss about this, but maybe I would like to maybe continue with first question. And I think that what is possible to do with customers is that it's necessary to change producer. It's necessary to change. It's a long way, it's a hard way, but it's necessary to do, because when we don't change producer, consumer don't believe to us that we are sustainable, that we are correct to the customer.
Yeah. Thank you. I will pick up, and actually I thought you were going to ask the opposite question to our first question, that often it's too easy to feel that we push the responsibility onto the consumers. So how do we avoid doing that and making it all the consumer's fault? But I like your point that actually to recognise that we are all consumers. Isabel, do you want to pick up on either of those, the textile waste issue or the kind of how we get consumers to change, or the balance between the responsibility of consumers and manufacturers?
Well, as I said before, going sustainable, it takes some years, and it takes some change of mentality. So I would start by teaching at very young age the meaning of sustainability and the need to change. Because most of us would never separate garbage some years ago. But our kids, a lot of our kids taught us how to do it. So you have to teach the young generation to be more sustainable. Because if you look, I grew up in the 80s, which means that the thing was to buy a lot, no matter where. Buy a lot of clothes, change every so many weeks. There was a lot of money around. We had, from the 60s to the 80s, a huge increase in economic growth. So the thing to do was to have. Doesn't matter where it comes from. But that has changed. But it takes a long time to change. So I think both ourselves, the companies, the government has to make a big effort on going sustainable. But not just going sustainable on the TV, it's going sustainable on the public tenders. Because when you supply, when you supply the governments, and a lot of us supply the governments, sustainability, it's price, price, and price. So we have to include what we really want to have in the future. So we have to start at every level, not just like make the law or the companies have very strict environmental rules. We have to work together. And strategically, we have to know where do we really want to be from 5, 10 years' time. So I think it's a common effort. It takes long, but we have to start. We're already behind it.
I think there's some interesting parallels in the US and the purchasing requirements around minority-owned businesses. So now you will get preferential treatment through government tenders if you are minority-owned and run. So that's seen quite a change. Shahriare, do you want to pick up on either of those?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm very much aligned with Isabel, and I really, really like the question. I think sustainability, it's all about the philosophy. I mean, it's an umbrella term. A lot include there, right? Embracing there. I can give an example. For example, my teenage daughter, our daughter, she always liked to buy the old clothes. And wherever we go, she tried to find out some flea market or something like that. We have never taught her. And we have seen this tendency with the many youngs. And when I asked that why you want to buy the clothes from the flea market, because she thought that it sustains. That is why it's still in the flea market, right?
Yeah.
And of course, she do not want to take another, to produce a new cloth, of course, you need new resource. So she wants to save that. So that's, I think, all about the mentality. And we have been talking about the next generation. They are going towards that direction. I think on that aspect, it's all good. We just need to support from the industry that we are promoting sustainability. But on the other hand, just coming back to this recycling point, also that we have been talking a lot about the recycling, but we also need to think about the upcycling, the things that you are doing. That's amazing. I mean, you are producing products from the waste, but at the same time, I think we also need to think about creating more values through upcycling. So when we are taking the textile waste, the best way is to produce a fiber that can be applied again in the textile, so it will have better value. I'm not saying that we are undermining the value over there. We are best utilizing that is possible at the moment, but we really need to look forward that what raw materials we are providing for the textile industry. We say often in Spinnova that in the future, Spinnova will be the best raw material for Spinnova. We don't want to use anymore the wood. We want to use Spinnova.
Great. And I mean, I do agree with the line as well around we absolutely have got to stop sending it to landfill. I mean, the methane breakdown, et cetera, et cetera. So I was at the Vogue Business Green Summit on Monday, speaking there, and Stella McCartney highlighted that she's actually run out of waste. I don't know if this was spin more than substance, but she said she's run out of waste and she's happy to take anyone else's as well, in line with your question. Andreas, closing point on either of those?
Yeah, I don't want to be devil's advocate,
Oh,
but
no, you can.
I see it a bit different than you two. I think and we made the mistake in Switzerland. We thought we saw on the telly, and all politicians, they run Fridays for Future, and now the whole young generation wants to be sustainable. And in my peer group, I see many children going to flea markets and living a sustainable lifestyle. But in the class of my children, we are living in a region where the school has really very poor people as well, and they don't do that. The
Right.
people go to the flea market who could afford to buy new clothes, but the ones who haven't got a lot of money, they go to Wish and buy
Yeah.
fast fashion. That's what, this is just my peer group, and in Switzerland also when we had some polls, the young generation, they don't want to buy, to spend more money for fuel and so on. So we should not sit at a place and not see a majority who is not behaving the way we would like to them to behave.
Yeah, totally.
We shouldn't be that elite and not see what the real common ground is in many people who haven't got the money.
And again, it comes back to status signals as well. If you
Yes.
can afford to shop, then it can be a real status signal to not buy new.
Yes.
But if you are struggling, it doesn't send the same signals for you and your peer group. Okay, we need to stop. Thank you so much. I won't do a wrap up because the panelists just spoke for themselves and it was brilliant. Thank you so much. And on to the next session. And again, such an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for that interesting discussion. I will ask to invite our both presidents to share a little gift to express our gratitude. So please stay on stage for a small gift from DirectorRETEX and ATP.
Oh, yes, we'll take a picture.
Thank you.
I assume it's in sustainable bag. Okay. Okay, thanks again for this first panel. Let's move on swiftly with our second panel. We spoke about the communication, measuring, all the challenges related to that. Now we will talk about probably even a bigger concern for many of our companies, which is the financial side. So how do we finance and how can we afford developing a sustainable textile industry? And we have a second panel coming up, and I will immediately pass the floor to our moderator to introduce the panel and take it from here. Please.
Yeah, please sit down here.
No. Test.
Now it's working. I think this morning has set this discussion up very nicely. We've heard a lot about the importance of storytelling, communicating what companies are doing to operate more sustainably, but now we're going to get a little bit into more of the brass tacks about what it takes to do that. And the conversations at the start of the morning really set up the tensions here, where the European textile industry has this incredible opportunity to really differentiate itself by leading in this space. But to do so requires upfront investments, and we're in a very uncertain and volatile economic moment, which makes it difficult to make long-term investments that maybe take time to pay off. And fundamentally, what we are talking about here is a wholesale change in the way the industry operates if we are to meet goals to cut carbon emissions by 2030, which is very soon. It means changing the power we use to power factories, changing the materials we use, the processes we use, and as was just discussed, changing the way we consume. So there's a lot to unpack here, but we have a fantastic panel to do so. Semra Ceylan, who is a senior manager at EY Consulting in Turkey. Giovanni Schneider, who's the president of wool supplier Schneider Group. Ricardo Silva, who is the CEO of the knit fabric supplier Tintex Textiles, and the empty seat, but I hope with us virtually, is fantastic. Hi, Andrea. So Andrea Baldo, who's the CEO of the Danish brand GANNI. So a lot of different perspectives here, which I think will be really, really interesting. But I want to start, Semra, because I know you've done some work on this. If you could give us a little bit of a sense, if we're talking about financing this transition, just what kind of numbers are we talking about? Like, what is this going to take?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sarah. I will give strategy and management consultant perspective in here. We have been working with Istanbul Apparel Exporters Association for so long now, and we have conducted many different projects. First one was the analysis of investment needs and government support required for the sector. The second one was an analysis of trade policy measures, and lastly, we have conducted a study with Turkish apparel industry on sustainability strategy and EU Green Deal compliance. So our project had 3 main phases. In the first phase, we conducted a holistic policy analysis, and we identified 10 areas for transformation focus. And the second thing we did was to turn the words, the regulation, into numbers. We have developed a model which identifies the current level of sustainability maturity and the EU Green Deal compliance maturity of the sector, and it's working at company level. So we conducted a huge field study, nearly 200 surveys with apparel companies, more than 60 surveys with textile producers in Turkey, and we have identified the current level of EU Green Deal compliance of Turkish apparel industry. And we also identified some improvement areas by specific company profiles. And lastly, developed a strategy and action plan to implement that strategy. So the answer to your question is it depends. It depends by the size of the company, by the certain operations the company conducts, and the current level of maturity. It may start from 1 million to 10 millions of euros for a company to become sustainable, to comply with the EU Green Deal.
By sustainable, you mean meet the requirements of the Green Deal?
Exactly. There are 2 certain perspectives. In medium run, we have 2030 goals. In long run, we have 2050. And the model we developed identifies what minimum score a company needs to get to comply with 2030 and what minimum score it needs to get to comply with 2050. And we are able to develop some specific, to the point actions for companies, for sector in general, to comply with these two medium run, long run goals of European Green Deal.
And then the financial range you found was in the millions to the...
Millions to 100 million,
So
maybe.
depending on the company, millions to 100 million, and that's the company level. I know that at an industry level, the annual investment in various different studies has been set in the billions. So it's a very substantial challenge. But Ricardo, Giovanni, Andrea, you know, operating in the industry, maybe starting just with actions you're taking right now, you know, where are you putting money? Where do you see the opportunities? And Giovanni, maybe to start with you on that.
Well, I am particularly unlucky because I am at the very beginning of the supply chain. Basically, my suppliers are the growers. So once you've done your job and your nice LCA on your company, tier one, which is very easy and not that expensive to be made, especially if you are a commodity trader, you have a very limited amount of product. Then you have to focus on your tier two suppliers. And I have 100,000 growers from New Zealand to Mongolia. And that's where I have to focus if I want to reduce my scope 2 CO2 emissions by 2030. And to be very honest with you, I've been hearing a lot about SBTIs. For people in our position who have to talk to the growers, the time frame set by the European Union, it's not in line on what it's possible to be done. It will take many more years to introduce growers, nomad growers from Mongolia to regenerative agriculture practices.
And is that what you see as the solutions? It's about from your perspective,
From
it's investing in regenerative.
So, well, usually we don't own the land, so invest in education and invest in programs that obviously educate these people to a point where they will be able in future to sell their product. The other problem we have is that, for instance, I am in animal fibers, and animal fibers have many positive characteristics according to European regulations, but they require a lot of land, they require water, and they emit CO2. And that's extremely complicated and poses us on the side of the bad guys sometimes. So explaining these people that their future depends very much on what they do on their land is extremely important. But there is no standard for that. As we were talking last night, I believe most of my suppliers already have some sort of policy to reduce CO2 emissions. The Australian Wool Association last week declared that 2021 was the first year they were negative and a negative CO2 impact. But as there is no standard, there is no piece of paper, there is nothing I can prove to my customers that my product is compliant.
I think you've opened up a lot of things that we will return to because there's a lot to unpack there. But I also want to pose the same question to Ricardo because I think it's going to be interesting as we move through the supply chain to see where the different focuses are as well.
Yeah, I think between the three of us, till now I'm the only one in the industry itself. And I think in this audience, the majority are companies that produce something, I think. So I'm more in line maybe with them in this case. So my point of view is sustainability in the past, when we started to talk about it and making investments, let's say buy greener products or these raw materials that are more sustainable, we were testing, not knowing what will be the outcome, right? So it's just a matter of fun at the end, because the market was not there, it was very incipient. But the ones that could go first maybe had an advantage on the market. So to be like pioneers in this field, and some companies were in this role. I think nowadays is a totally different situation. We are not doing the same thing anymore. Today we are blending sustainability with economic situation. We are talking about energy, efficiency, digitalization, and I think it's much easier, in my opinion, to manage this way, because we are aligning goals. And if we push for higher efficiency in our companies, in my case, I have two companies, a knitting company and a dye house. The dye house uses a lot of energy, water, and chemicals, right? While the knitting house uses mainly electricity and yarns. Let's pick like that. So my role or my focus is to buy the best yarns that I can find from a quality perspective, to have less defects, so I can generate less waste. This is on the knitting house, because the energy is not significant in that place, but still we can do better. We can implement photovoltaic panels and so on. The big problem for us, or the challenge, is on the dye house, where we spend a lot of energy, and today we have a problem. And so our perspective on the last maybe 2 years, in the end, was how can we change completely our energy situation to be economically stable and still match our goals for the SBTIs, because we signed the SBTI goals a few years ago, and we never expected how and when we could achieve those goals. It was late, it was far away, 2030, 50, and so on. So we did not know. We knew that we wanted to do something, but still economically was not viable 2 or 3 years ago. But today, that's mandatory, right?
But how do you manage making investments that are going to have to happen anyway if it's dependent on an economic environment that changes?
Point is, we need to make investments for the short term because of this crisis, but also long term. So we need to cope on investment that can endure. So this energy change on the systems, can we use it still 20 years in the future? I believe so. That's why we invest.
Creating long-term value.
Exactly, looking always at the long-term value, but understanding how we can do it on the short term. And then the point is, do we have money to do that? Most of the companies don't. We don't have enough money to do this on our own, and that's why we have this panel, right? I think, on how can we finance sustainability, how can we finance these investments, short-term and long-term. And that's a different situation. But the point where we are now investing is clearly energy changing on the systems, both, and everything that we can do.
So bringing in
out from outside,
now.
but also efficiency inside. Can we reduce our energy consumption on the processing? Yes, we can with digitalization. Can we change the sources? Yes, everyone is doing now biomass or GPL or whatever. Can we do anything else? I think so, but also internally. Can we change our processes?
So I want to build on the point you made about, is there the money to make these kind of investments? Like, Andrea, I want to bring you in here now, because often I think when you talk about this issue on the supply side, the complaint is made that people are very willing to make these investments. They want to make their operations more sustainable, more efficient, but it costs money, and brands aren't willing to pay a premium for materials that are made better. How are you, as the representative of the entire retail industry, looking at this?
Yeah, and brand as well. So it's a very complex seat to be. I'm sorry not to be there with you physically. No, I think the brands has a responsibility, a clear responsibility, and I look at it from
sorry, one sec, Andrea. Is it possible to turn up the volume?
Hello?
That's a bit better. Sorry, we were just not hearing you well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, better.
Yes. Okay, good. So I was saying that, I think starting from a macroeconomic point of view, which is how is the profit pool of the industry separated between the players? And it's clear that the brand has a responsibility they need to take in making some of these investments possible and change, because the profit pool is not equally reparted by the different parties. So definitely brands has a role to play into the change into a more responsible way of consumption and production and so on. What we have done very tangibly is that we need to make the change internal. So the first thing we did is that we need not to think about investment in a way like invest a return of investment, like you do, you buy a new machine, but is how you embed your responsible angle into your business model. And I use more the reference of research and development, because we have research and development teams that actually develop collections, and we have allocated cost and investment each year to do that, we are doing exactly the same things with our responsible programs. And so we are trying to arrive to 1% of a total net turnover, actually just invested in initiatives related to responsibility. Which are these initiatives? One, I think it's in cooperation with suppliers. And actually we have a clear case in Portugal, where we have been moving from the offsetting, where we were basically taxing ourselves because we are producing a product that has an impact on a planet, into an investment with our suppliers to reduce the carbon emission along the supply chain. So in this case, is a form of partnership because we are actually putting money into making sure that their energy usage for the production of our garment, but also the garment of other brands in the same factories, are actually certified with a reduction in the CO2 emission. And that is something that we have started, and we are going to implement it in more and more suppliers. This was a pilot that started in Portugal, as I said. We have already another pilots in India. But this is the way in which the brands can actually support in the change together with the suppliers and actually have an impact on the entire ecosystem, not just on the product we produce. Because if we don't start thinking that we need to collaborate all together and make the change, and everybody just focusing on their own silos, this is not going to happen. And the second area of investment for us, which is key, and I think you spoke in the previous panel, is about the materials you used. Because if there is no revolution in the innovation on the material that are going to be actually used to produce garment, reducing the impact on CO2, and so talking about fiber-to-fiber recycling, talking about new biomaterial that actually replace leather. I mean, without this investment in this, we will never going to be able to do it at scale. And this is another area where the brands needs to invest, because there is an ecosystem of small companies and startups that start having ideas, but they need actually scalability and obviously support, financial support. And again, I think the brands needs to have a responsibility in doing that. And actually at the second stage, have a responsibility to connect also this small company with the garment manufacturer, so that at the end, there is a benefit in the product that actually at the end we will put it on the market. So there is a lot the brand needs to do, but the first thing is to think that it's not one-off investment with a return, but is actually an investment that needs to be done in operating the model, because the model of doing, for us, fashion needs to change. And we feel this as a moral obligation to do that.
I think one of the things you raised that's particularly interesting, one, that the model needs to change, but also I think what was clear, also in what you said, Giovanni, is that it is not necessarily that the things that need to change are in control of individual companies. So Giovanni, as you said, it's about the growers, that you don't own the land. And Andrea, you said you're looking more at materials and the factories you work with. How big and complex a challenge is this, Giovanni, for you when you're working with you said thousands of different growers, and really looking at systems change?
Yeah, and I think it came out several times already this morning, the fact that different customers require different sustainability credentials. Volvo does not want the nuclear power. Maybe GANNI does not want a specific chemical in its process. And therefore, in order to progress and make us confident to do the right investment, we must, make sure that we have a regular sales with that customer for the coming years. And there is nothing more irrational than fashion, where the designer changes and everything has to restart from zero from one day to the other. I was mentioning last night to somebody that we had a very important program on regenerative cashmere with a very important brand and we invested 5 years of work teaching 5 different communities on how to herd around Mongolia in a more sustainable way. And then the designer changed, and we were left with all the investment and all the material that immediately lower its value to the market value, and so it is very important that sustainability is embraced by brands with a long-term view, choosing correctly their suppliers and helping them in the right directions to make sure that we don't waste money in following everyone's requirements.
I think that's a really important point, and it goes a little bit to what you were saying, Ricardo, about where does the money come from and how do you create an environment that people are going to invest in. Semra, I'm curious, because your work kind of looked at this within the context of Turkey. We have a regulatory framework that the EU has set. Yeah. Is it sufficient to give companies confidence that they can make investments and things won't change, as Giovanni just outlined?
Well, we saw that there are actually two things before financing sustainability. The first one is awareness, access to information. Then second one is access to finance. So in our study, we have conducted a huge survey with producers and exporters. And we find out that Tier 1 producers, large-scale companies, are quite aware and actually mature in terms of sustainability and EU Green Deal compliance. But when it comes to small and medium-scale companies, SMEs, the situation is not that bright. So we find out that 1 out of every 5 SMEs do not exactly know what they need to do in order to comply with EU Green Deal. What are the main specific transformation focuses to become more sustainable? So companies need to be more aware of the regulatory needs. And actually, regulation is a bit complex. Some rule sets, requirement criteria are not very well defined. So that was one problem. And the second problem is access to finance. So there are certain amount of money required to finance these investments with high initial investment costs plus operational costs. And we see 3 things for financing this transformation. Mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, but we need a combination of these 3. First, we need good partnership between brands and their producers. So there must be sustainable orders. Buyers, brands need to be consistent and sincere about their demands from their producers. And they must stick with a fair pricing policy with them. So if the producer is not able to reflect their investment costs for being more sustainable to their prices, then the investment is at risk. So the second thing is their own resources. I mean, in Turkey, Tier 1 producers are operating with approximately 10% margin. So margins are really tight, and 60% of Tier 1 companies say that they use their own resources for their sustainability investments. So at long run, medium run, it risks investments because you are working with tight margins and you are using your company's own resources without being able to reflect to the final product. Then it risks medium run, long run investments. And lastly, we need new financial resources for financing these investments. We know EU, European Commission declared a huge transformation fund. National governments has their own funds, other IFIs and bilateral funds are available, but we require more money, and especially from SME side, we require more access to that funds. So what we need is a combination of these three channels. We need more financing tools, better access to that tools. Companies also need to invest in sustainability investments with their own resources, but with a strong collaboration with their value chain partners. So with a combination of three, we believe the green transformation is achievable. but all three is quite important.
Ricardo, I'm curious to get you to kind of build on that because you introduced this idea of, where does the money come from? So what's your perspective?
So I speak for all the SMEs in Portugal and in Europe. And it's not easy to get money or to have the money on the normal business and the investments. Means that we need to rely on finance systems, either banks or national funds, European funds. That's clear. We have done this for a while. I think the majority of the companies did and do. So, and it works. Okay, it works. It's clear that it works. We have support to finance all these investments, and then we see the turnover increase and the yield from these investments maybe after the 5th year or the 6th year. On a normal business case, no one will invest if it is not less than 3 years. That's why we need this support. That's the cash that we need upfront, right? And it works. My concern today, probably in Portugal, maybe a lot of other companies feel the same, is that the money exists. We talked about all the money that exists. The point is, maybe it does not come fast enough or at the expectation level on timing. And that is my concern today. So we can make plans that we make the clients to the funds, to this finance, because the banks have also the same issue. They cannot issue cash to us if they have not the grants from all the regulatory people. And then we have all this bureaucracy. This is my problem today, that I see that should be changed. Probably now someone is changing something there. We can live on expectations, because Pedro mentioned that we got out of these not blue ocean, but the calm tides, and now we are in high volatility, right? So we need to deal with that. And we need a lot of planning, even if it is just a short-term planning to do it. And if we try to anticipate these fundings, these finance from banks that we probably think will come or will be available in 3 months or 6 months, and then it only happens 2 years later, we lost 2 years of investments, we lost 2 years of efficiency, and we lost 2 years of reduction of emissions. And this is my concern. Maybe, Pedro, you can help with something. This is a global story. I think in Portugal we talk a lot about this. People talk more about this now also in society, so probably it will change. But the point is, the good thing is this support, it exists, and this really welcome. We welcome the support because it helps us a lot, because we need this money for the upfront cash. And then we deliver the money again. That's how it works. Companies need that to work on.
So you really need those regulatory signals, and you need government financing, because banks may not always be there.
Because the banks also need the funding system from the government and from the European funds. That's how they reduce their risk, because in high volatility times, they need to reduce their exposure to risk. That's clear. Just a bit of engineering that we need.
And I want to think a little bit about the market itself. And Andrea, I wanted to come back to you here, because you sort of mentioned how GANNI is looking at this in terms of devoting a proportion of everything it makes to investments to change its supply chain and the materials it uses. You guys have external investors. The market is not particularly rosy right now for the industry as a whole. What are those conversations with investors like? Historically, this tension between short-term investments that will immediately serve the business versus long-term investments that might serve sustainability have been difficult to have with investors.
Yeah, that is the day-to-day conversation when things are getting a little bit difficult. No, I think for us it's a little bit easier, because the purpose of the company is to make a change into the industry. So that is what the shareholders see as the reason why they have invested in GANNI, and they feel that GANNI is a tool for that. So obviously it means that the tension that we may have to the market, that luckily for us as a brand that is, I think with the right maybe price points, with the right narrative around the brand, is much less affected, allow us really to keep our promise and keep investing the 1% that we want. But again, I think this is easier if it's felt like a moral obligation as a brand and a respect to the purpose of the brand, which is actually a respect to the not only the shareholders but to all other stakeholders. So my employee that actually are joining GANNI because of a change as a tool for change. The supplier we have just described, some of them has like 4 or 5 years relationship with us. So it's a brand that try to create that kind of a relationship in which we can build this thing together. So difficult conversation, but not touching actually the core of what the purpose of the company is. So definitely we have to find savings somewhere else. On the point I think that you raised on the money, I just want to highlight that again, it needs to be brands together. So I've seen starting coalitions here at for example, at the Global Fashion Agenda, where brands start putting together actually funding in order to ensure that the suppliers can have actually access to money or granted access to money and give collaterals to banks. Because I go back to the point, if it is a single brand or a single supplier, it's very difficult to obtain any kind of support. But when there is a coalition around of brand that has brand power in a way, and also maybe solid balance sheets, that's actually where we can see the change. And I've seen this conversation starting at least at Copenhagen.
How much do you see it starting? You're talking about the fund that the Apparel Impact Initiative launched earlier this year with the aim to raise $10 billion, I think, to invest in the supply chain, right? Or are you talking about something
Yes.
else? Yes. So that's one fund. Are you seeing that conversation grow elsewhere and more capital being raised?
Yeah, I think there is some kind of work I cannot disclose, but led by the Global Fashion Agenda here and brands that has been here in Copenhagen last May, of which we are trying to be part of, obviously much larger brand that are really looking into a similar way of facilitate that kind of transfer of funds from brands to suppliers with the idea of payback. I mean, it's again, as we said, there is an opportunity to make a change into the system and actually to accept that kind of return over a longer amount of time. But again, it needs to be a coalition of brands, because then when you put together 10 brands that are very large, they have the power actually to make a change. Obviously, we will participate as a smaller part, but that's where I see the big opportunities.
I'm curious to hear from the suppliers on this panel. Have you heard any conversations about this kind of thing from your side, and what do you think about it?
Can pick it. I had a customer that approached me a month ago with this kind of initiative, saying that they would like to support us with funding, either with their money or within banks. A bit shady at the beginning, to be honest. How could they support the banking system in Portugal if they are far away? But with their own money, if they can finance, like Andrea mentioned, that everything is paid off after a while, or it is linked to the normal business thing, then in my opinion, makes sense.
So it's a new trade financing model almost, where they would pay.
I like to hear more about that.
And it's beginning to emerge. That's really interesting. Giovanni, you
I
look
heard
pensive.
a lot. No, I heard a lot about it. I never had this opportunity, and frankly speaking, I also find it unnecessary. If you think that probably 20 years ago, before China joined the World Trade Organization, there were many more companies and many more profitable companies in Europe. That was because brands were leaving a higher margins to suppliers. As of today, we are in the situation where we are very much relying on imports. Most of the producers over here have been killed, and now we have to find a financial tool in order to finance these suppliers of brands, such as because we don't have the money to invest anymore. So probably it's a cure, a political cure, but it worked better 20 years ago. You know, it's and again, this probably goes back to ensuring a playing field for competition, making sure that there is no subsidies coming for imported goods and stuff like that.
Right, so it's not just about the investments that need to be made to change how operations are happening, it's also about how do we disincentivize actions
If a
that
company
operate?
is profitable, they have enough money to do all the necessary investment by themselves. And these investments, they have, they bring long-term benefits to the company. One of which is the guaranteeing a future life.
So I'm glad you raised this, because I think we've kind of been talking around a little bit one of the key challenges here, which is across the supply chain, is there a willingness to pay for these changes?
It's very, listen, there is a lot of talk. Some people are starting to pay a little bit more for some change. As I said before, they want something back, which is today just a piece of paper that proves that something has been done. No one is really going in depth and really appreciate what the whole supply chain has been doing. We're still at the very beginning. We're still at the very beginning of that.
Andrea, I'm gonna throw this to you, and then I'm gonna open it up to questions. But this question of whether companies are willing to pay the premiums that come with more sustainable operations. You know, you said one thing that GANNI is doing is it's looking at sort of iterating with different types of materials and trying them out and seeing how it works. But you know, you have an opportunity to speak directly to the consumer. Will people pay more for products that are quote unquote more sustainable?
The short answer is no. And I think you have it in front of you. No, I think in the previous panel we talked about younger generations thinking that they will make more, I would say, responsible choices in consumption, so that they are taking purpose and responsibility important when they make choices, but then they are also the one that consume a lot of fast fashion, which is actually a business model that is not sustainable. So you see that the customers actually wants to have the solution embedded in the product. They are not going to pay a premium for a sustainable product. What we see is that they will choose wisely. So when they have two products similar, they will definitely do a choice that is most responsible. But in terms of paying a premium for that, and so going back to the point that other colleagues made, I haven't seen a return on investment on this if nobody's going to pay a premium. So that's why there is a needs of a coalition around, and there is the importance that who has more in terms of profit is able to invest part of this profit to cure a system that actually is not sustainable and requires a rethinking. And that is where we see ourselves as a role as in this industry, to actually lead that part and to actually make things, because I agree totally. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of opportunities and a lot of politics, but at the end, I found that when I go to the suppliers in Portugal that is trying to do a reorganization of his function and the plant, and he needs to do this investment, and we can participate investing our money into make that plan more effective and efficient in terms of energy and lowering the CO2 emission, is that when actually things happen. So actually brands needs to go there and do activities and put money on the table. And that's where we see change. And that's, I think, what the brand should do.
I'm curious to hear what everyone in the audience is interested, and I see a hand go up immediately. We'll take two questions, this one here and the lady in the back, and then answer them.
Yes. Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
So my name is Isabel. I'm a Dean of School of Economics and Business Studies here in the University of Lusíada, and a researcher on innovation for fashion sustainability. So rather than a question, I would like to make a comment that perhaps will bring other comments from the audience. And the comment is that in the innovation plan that was published by the European Union, one of the pillars is funding transition, okay? So this is, everyone knows that we are in a disruptive stage in terms of changing the model of fashion. And so there is a lot of things going on. And just, you know, I very much agree with what Ricardo said about the timing. That's the main problem. Because, for instance, you have the Carbon Disclosure Project that represents 140 trillion US dollars of investors, private investors, and that is advising companies in terms, so it is advising investors what companies in the future they should invest into.
So is the comment sort of
this is one thing. The Carbon Disclosure Project is public. In the previous panel, Isabel has talked about this. And so I totally agree that the question is, there is a lot of money, and there will be more money because there is also another initiative.
Just so that everyone has a chance to ask questions, let's try and keep them.
Yes, I'll make it short. You have also the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative, supported by the United Nations. And you also have the Sustainable Finance for Banks. So at this stage, you have several reports in terms of how to avoid risk lending in banks. And one of the things that was reported in one of these reports by Switzerland is that you have to avoid to invest in companies that are not sustainable and that are not complying with the circular economy.
So it's about financial risk now.
So I think that what GANNI has said, I totally agree. What Antonio has said, I totally agree. There is a lot of money, and for investors who want to have money back, who have return on investment, the finance system is doing a turnaround right now. Perhaps it's going, you know, it's not very much noticeable. People who are outside the financial system don't know about it, but it certainly is on the way.
Thank you, Isabel. Appreciate the point. And then I think there was a question at the back.
Hi, everyone. Hello? Oh, closer. So my name is Helene Smits. I'm representing Recover, which is a textile recycling company. And a very practical question, actually, which is, as far as I know, and it's maybe not in every market of textiles the same, but in apparel, the cost of material is only a small fraction of the total cost of the garment. I've heard some people say, and I know also from our side, okay, so what if your material is really much more sustainable, but it's only 10% more expensive, which I think a lot of companies can actually, they cannot maybe be completely cost neutral, but the premium is not that high. How come we need to say to the consumer, you need to pay more, really significantly more for a sustainable product if the green premium on a material is only 10% of the material cost? And I really wonder.
I feel like Giovanni.
Yes, please. I was actually hoping for this question, and if you didn't ask, I would have asked it myself. There was, it is true on fibers, the price difference between a conventional and an organic or a sustainable fiber is marginal. It comes to a few cents or a couple of dollars per piece of garment. But then fashion has all of these multipliers mechanics. So if a yarn costs 20 cents more, it ends up that the t-shirt made with that yarn would cost 20% more. So this is where I don't agree with the research. They say that people want to buy sustainable but not prepared to pay a premium. They're not prepared to pay the markup on the premium. And if we somehow could manage to reduce the markup on the premium, everyone would like to buy something sustainable.
Bring in Andrea to respond to that.
Not there.
Oh, did we just convenient moment to lose him? Maybe when we see if we can get him back, Ricardo, I think you had something to add.
It's about this. So if something costs 10 cents more, the cost calculations of every company and brand is with the multipliers. For a single reason is risk. If a brand will take the risk to buy something that is slightly more expensive and probably will not sell everything, what do they do with that? That's why they make all these risk cost calculations and take into consideration, apart from the multiplier of 5 and 10, because they take that into all their operations. It's about risk. Can we reduce risk for them?
And greenwashing. Only 1% of fibers so far of clothes are recycled. The demand is much bigger than that. So of course, let's price my recycled product as high as I can. That's how retailers are approaching sustainability. It's actually become, so is sustainability profitable? It is more profitable for the people that are in the shop than for the people who are actually in charge of doing the whole system of the sustainability itself.
I have a comment. Then let me comment.
Yeah, please.
Okay, go there.
Okay, Andrea, sorry, we lost you at a critical moment. What's your response to that point that it's all on the brand?
Can you say, I was almost jumping into the screen, No, I think there is two parts. No, one is economic part, which is obviously if you are a brand, you have a lot of operating costs which are fixed. When you are operating stores, when you are operating e-commerce, when you are operating the different channels, organizations, this is not a variable base, which is similar to actually the supplier side as well. So cost of goods sold has a big impact, obviously, in the economics of a brand. That doesn't mean that, as I said before, you need to make important choices, and we did it. So when we are transitioning into a more responsible version, definitely it costs more, for no doubt, and we are trying to reduce the impact to our consumer. Absolutely, because if you want to scale it, the responsible, we can actually put a markup on everything we do. But it's not true that we can actually pass along just the increased cost to the consumer, because there is more that actually goes to operate a brand. But I think we are all agreeing that is the major issue. No, it's the distribution of profitability in the industry that requires changes very far from the consumer, where actually margins are more shrinked compared to the brand. And then I go back to my first point: the brand needs to take actions, and they need to cooperate in order to make this transition. Because if we wait that the brand find the transition done upstream, that's not going to happen. And it's my let's say personally the reason why I'm running this company, and the reason why we are so vocational, that we need to do things together, because it cannot be a competitive game. If it is a competitive game, we know already the results. Is going to be the prisoner dilemma. Nobody's going to do anything, and we are going to be doomed. So we have to exit this consideration. And it comes only with transparency. I totally agree. More into the supply chain, more coordination amongst brand and more suppliers. Otherwise, we know already what is the final results.
And I think that's an interesting point around how the financial system is also beginning to look at this as well, to your point, Isabel. Ricardo, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, the comment. We have been talking a lot about fibers, products, sustainable products, but in the end, no one knows if a product is sustainable or not. We can know if it is cotton, synthetics. He doesn't like synthetics. But we don't know in the end if the product is sustainable, because there is much more than just the content of the compositions, right? So processing, water, energy, nothing is told, nothing is transparent still.
Well, and we haven't even touched on how we're defining sustainable. That's a different conversation.
My point is, a few years ago, I was a believer that things should be more expensive because they are innovative, because they are, let's say, more sustainable. Today, I don't believe that. I believe that we can impact a lot more in our, maybe not himself, because he trades. So you need to rely on someone who is producing something. But in the industry, we produce, we operate, we have inefficiencies, and a lot of them. So what I think we should think about more than just what we buy from is speaking that thing about the transition. Can we transition to something that we are much more efficient than before?
So focus on the opportunities.
Because in the past we were using coal and hands for everything. Now everything is more mechanic, right? So can we do more? Can we reduce our operating costs? Because in my product, half of it is raw materials, half of it is inside costs. Part is energy, part is labor, part is risk and inefficiency. Can I reduce all these factors? I think so. And the investments we are talking now about, this part is not the raw materials because they fluctuate. I don't care. I put on the price.
Yeah.
But these investments we are talking about that should be financed, in my opinion, are the ones that reduce these
Operating costs.
operating costs for the future, that are the ones that increase our efficiency and reduce the emissions for the long term, and not just using cotton instead of lyocell, instead of Spinnova and whatever.
Yeah.
Because they will be there today, maybe not tomorrow, but our companies probably will still exist manufacturing other stuff.
I'm conscious we're all that's standing between everyone and lunch, but I know there were a few more questions, so I wanted, unless everyone's too eager for lunch, to ask another one. Which they are. All right. Giovanni, I feel like you wanted to make one more point.
No, just one thing. Thank you for mentioning my deep love with synthetic fibers and so on. But the big elephant in the room that no one has ever touched in this conference, it's overconsumption. At the end of the day, we're talking about sustainability. In 2000, we already know that our development level was unsustainable, and we were producing half of the pieces of garment and half of the amount of fibers. As of today, there are 120 billion kilos of fibers produced every year, which means 15, 16 kilos per person. And here we are discussing about how to improve 5 to 10% our machinery or the cost of electricity. So, of course, there is no solution to this dilemma. If we want to be more efficient, we have to increase volumes. But, I would like people to go away and think, if 20 years ago, maybe life was not easier and better for everyone else here in Europe with reduced volumes, but more profitability and more company localized over here.
I love that you just decided to sort of throw degrowth into the conversation
Yeah.
at the end. I think what this very wide-ranging conversation has just sort of begun to scratch the surface of is the extent of, what is a big challenge, but also a big opportunity with no single answers. That we've talked about all kinds of different things that need to be financed. Some individual companies can do, some will need industry coalitions. Some of the stuff we haven't even talked about around infrastructure projects is going to need much bigger intergovernmental cooperation. So there is a lot to keep unpacking over lunch, but I won't keep anyone from it any longer. I just want to thank all of our panelists. Andrea, sorry you couldn't be here in person, but Semra, Giovanni, Ricardo, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for moderating a very, indeed, exciting, lively session. Again, if I can ask Mario Jorge and Alberto to come on stage to share a small token of appreciation. Alberto can, yeah. Meanwhile, so we are indeed now heading for lunch. We'll be served outside. What time is it? We are just 10 minutes late, so I suggest that we resume with the workshop sessions past 2. So we said 2 o'clock on the program, but let's make it 2:15, so you have a full hour to network. And as I mentioned before, there are 2 parallel workshops taking place. This session, this room here will have the workshop on EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Next door will be the workshop on Digital Product Passport. EPR, Digital Product Passport. And then we will have a 1-hour discussion, a short break in between. There will be coffee served ongoing. And then the second 2 sessions here will be on recycling textile waste, workshop number 3. And next door will be on the labeling product environmental footprints. All right, but again, everything is on the agenda. So